So, the translations are out for My Hero Academia Manga Chapter 355. And let's just say that Jiro does the unthinkable and helps defeat All for One? Yeah, that isn't a complete exaggeration of what happened, and you'll see exactly why. But first, right after this. Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Drew, and I'm here to do my review for My Hero Academia Manga Chapter 355. And before we start off the actual review, I'd like to say that unfortunately My Hero Academia is going to be off next week, but that's going to be fine for two reasons. One, it means Hirokoshi will be able to get some more rest, and mangaka need as much rest as possible because of the jobs that they do. And second of all, I'm actually going to be doing something that weekend, and I possibly will reveal it in this video or maybe in the next video, but let's just say that it's going to be anime related. So with that out the way, let's start talking about what happened in this chapter, and for the most part, what we get is the potential conclusion to the fight between Hawks, Jiro, Tokoyami, as well as Endeavor versus All for One. And it may seem a little bit shorter of a fight, but in reality, once again, this falls within 2 or 3 chapters that it takes for normal fights in My Hero Academia to conclude. And most fights in My Hero Academia don't really go over the 5 chapters. But then we also have to keep in mind that potentially this could be a second half of another fight. Because we do get a fair amount of the students as well as Hawks fighting against All for One, but it does seem a little bit unconclusive, but that it seems as if it's building up to something else, if not within the next chapter, at least something else that's going on within the war later on down the line. So let's get a little bit more in depth in this chapter when it comes to Endeavor. Because even though Endeavor is supposed to be fighting All for One, he doesn't fight All for One at all in this chapter. What he mainly does is come to a realization that, oh yeah, I probably shouldn't get mad at All for One because this is all kind of my fault. So we see that Endeavor, who is barely able to get up off the ground, is still able to fight, which is even then concluded by Hawks himself, where he senses that Endeavor is still breathing, so the damage that he took is not fatal and he can still fight. And what's most likely going to happen with Endeavor is that he is going to once again cauterize one of his wounds and get back into the fight and fully defeat All for One and break his mask. If it hasn't been broken already, but spoilers, it does. And now that we're talking about the fight with All for One, oh boy is All for One once again at his worst. Because we see that the fighting of this chapter begins with Hawks coming to a realization that Tokoyami is like the other heroes and that he shouldn't be treating him like his mentee or his student. That they should be treated as equals because he was put in this location to help Hawks because of his ability to fly. And that his purpose is to provide support, so Hawks finally begins to accept him and even makes a callback to the fact that Tokoyami saved him. And while that is all happening, you also have All for One being All for One and taking advantage of the situation and striking without hesitation. Because he realizes that among the 3 people that he is fighting, Jiro is the weakest link. So he sends his hand-like mouth things to try and attack her. But luckily enough, Hawks is able to get her out of the situation while Tokoyami is able to avoid the attack as well. And from here, we get a little bit more interesting interactions between Jiro and All for One. Hawks is attacking All for One's mask as usual using his feathers, but as we see, he's only using a couple feathers at a time, most likely because he's unable to use any more than that, because he doesn't have any more, which is even more confirmed that he has very little feathers left in this chapter that he can actually use. And as you have Tokoyami trying to confirm with Jiro what the plan is, we get to see Jiro at her weakest. Because we see that even though she chose to fight All for One of her own accord, she's scared, she's terrified, she's fearful. She was barely able to sense the attack coming, and even then, she really didn't have a way to avoid it. What she feels is fear. And she finally understands that the fear that Midoriya and Aoyama had when fighting against this individual. And All for One tries to capitalize on that fear, by blasting both Tokoyami and Jiro with a massive arm cannon. And even Hawks cannot help them because All For One stabs him with his rivet stab, and the students take the brunt of this attack, even to the point of Jiro literally losing one of her earphone jacks. But here is where her character comes more into play, because as All For One is criticizing them about being extras, which is the name of the chapter, and that they're nothing special, and that they shouldn't be the ones going up against the Demon Lord, Jiro responds with that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're weak, if you're strong, if you're special. All that matters in this moment is that he made her friends cry, so she's here to fight against him. And this is great because this plays into a major flaw of All For One, which is that he always underestimates whoever he is fighting, because in comparison to him, who is fighting for himself, pretty much everyone else is fighting for the sakes of someone else. Deku, All Might, Endeavor, even Shigaraki and Spitter to a lesser extent are fighting for things other than their own gain and benefit, while All For One is just doing it for himself. And as we see in this chapter, that is going to eventually bite him in the butt, most likely in the form of the Vestiges revolting against him. Because as Jiro gives her declaration and uses a new move, Heartbeat Wall Legato, and even though the attack itself is not very powerful, what is important is that it is somehow able to reverberate with the Vestiges inside of All For One and causing them to distract All For One long enough for Hawks to get a major hit out on his helmet with the help of Jiro's sonic waves, increasing the speed of his slash and attacking the same spot for a fourth time, finally breaking All For One's mask, which they finally accomplished the goal of this entire fight, but that does not mean that All For One has been taken down. And when it comes to the Vestiges, that is something that you can have an entire video talking about, because this ties into something that we've seen within the story about how Vestiges are able to respond to the will not only of the user, but of outside sources, and how outside sources can affect the Vestige world, as well as the Vestiges in the world themselves are able to go against the user depending on how strong their will is. And that this is something that All For One is going to underestimate the will of the Vestiges inside of him, and that could eventually lead to his downfall inside of Shigaraki, as it is leading to his downfall now. And how we've even seen prior how Vestiges of outside people and his enemies have led to him taking massive damage and setbacks to his plans. So yeah, that's an interesting topic that I really want to dive into more when the official translations come out. But overall, once again, I think that this was a solid chapter, if not a good chapter for My Hero Academia. We got to see some very cool action panels in this chapter, and not the best when it comes to choreography as well as character movements and positions, but My Hero Academia has never excelled when it comes to fight choreography. What matters most in the fights are the characters that are in it, the emotions that they put in it, and what they can get out of it to actually lead to a victory. And as we see in this chapter, we get to see that Jiro has truly grown as a character and as a hero, and that even in the face of fear, she's doing this not for selfish gain, but as a sort of revenge for what All For One has done to her friends. So this really just shows how much Jiro cares for her fellow classmates and the lengths that she's willing to go to try and help them, even to the point of heavily maiming herself if it means taking down All For One. As we got a little bit more development for Tokoyami and Hawks' relationship, as well as Endeavor coming to a realization that he shouldn't allow All For One to control his feelings, and that he should be keeping a cool and steady head, because a lot of what is going on in his own life is due to his own faults, and that he still needs to atone for them. But overall, like I said, very solid chapter, really enjoyed this chapter, and like I said, My Hero Academia is going to be on break, but that does not mean that I will not be trying my best to provide you more content in that break period. So yeah, Hopefully you liked the video, hopefully you liked the chapter, and if you did, leave a comment down below on what you liked about this chapter. Leave a like on the video if you liked this type of content, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you want to see more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!